It is a journey through the Bible with Mukhwana Isaac. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Yesterday, we looked at prophets and the meaning of history. Today, we start looking at these prophets one by one, and we shall begin with Amos and the God of justice. In each and everything, we are going to see actually we shall see that our God is a God of justice. And Amos talked about this God. Now, during the reign of Jeroboam the second, king of the northern kingdom of Israel, in about 784 to 744 BCE, the country was at peace once more. The kingdom became rich as the days of Solomon. But not everyone was rich. The rich became richer by making their workers who were poor work hard for very little pay and at times no pay. Riches brought much injustice and vice, and religious practices were performed without any corresponding attitude of the mind. God called a shepherd from Tekoa in the wilderness of Judah and sent him to the northern kingdom to speak in his name against these evils. His name was Amos. He went about preaching that God is just and demands that men in their lives turn justly. According to the understanding of the time, justice did not mean only the respecting of others' rights and property, but it meant everything which makes a man holy. Amos was the right man for this job. His day of open injustice demanded clear speaking, and Amos was very sharp-tongued. He used very strong language, but it was the only language that could be listened to and understood by the hard-hearted congregation. For instance, he compared the rich women of Samaria to large, lazy, and cruel cattle, like the cows of the Bashan plateau, which could so easily turn over and crush their own little ones. And the little ones of Israel were the poor and needy. Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who are in the mountain of Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush their needy. Yes, who say to their husbands, bring that we may drink. We read this in Amos chapter 4 verse 1. The desert life of Judah had taught Amos to be like the desert, dry and rough, with the straightforwardness that the hard life of the desert demanded for survival. The book of Amos is full of pictures of the desert life of that part of Judah, for it was this very desert life that turned him naturally to God and to the demands of God. Having so often watched the morning sun climb over the purple hills of Moab on the far side of the Dead Sea, he could easily think of God as he who turns deep darkness into the morning, the darkness of the day into night. That is chapter 5 verse 8. And who creates the winds, who sweeps across the bare desert lands, and which he uses to declare to man what is his thought. Chapter 4 verse 13. The loneliness of the desert, where he had very few friends, and where one had to live a hard, poor existence. This taught Amos that there was only one necessity in life: God Himself. In the one's friends, since these were few indeed, it was essential to keep them. And this could be done only by sincerity and honesty, dependence on God, and love for God, actually goodness, sincerity, and justice towards others. These were the lessons which Amos learned in the desert. And so they were the truth which God called him to preach to Israel. In order to get clothing and a change of food, Amos, who was a poor man, needed to take a good second job from time to time. And so he worked as a dresser of sycamore trees. Chapter 7 verse 14. He used to travel to the markets to exchange the wool and the cheese which he got from his animals. In the cities, he came into contact with foreigners from many countries. He would have heard of the crimes of these people, the buying, yes, and the buying and selling of slaves wholesale, the murdering of innocent people. Later on, about the year 750, when Amos started preaching at the Israelite sanctuary of Bashel, he fearlessly proclaimed God's anger and announced his punishment for these crimes against their fellow humans. This condemnation of Israel's long-standing enemies must have pleased the Israelites, but they had missed a point of Amos's preaching. The aim of his preaching was not just to condemn, but to call even these pagans to God and to imitate him as his love and justice. So Amos must have found favor amongst his hearers until he warned, actually he warned and turned against them also, and accused them of even greater wrong, for they were God's people who had ignored their God and his laws, and would therefore be punished more severely. Israel will be punished because they sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of shoes. They that trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth, and turn aside the way of the afflicted. A man and his father go in to the same maiden, so that my holy name is profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar, upon garments taken in pledge, and in the house of their God they drink the wine of those who have been fined. Chapter 2 verse 6 to 8. The rich will be punished for their injustices to the poor. Therefore, because you trample upon the poor and take from him exactions of wheat, you have built houses of hewn stone, but you shall not dwell in them. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you shall not drink their wine. Chapter 5 verse 11. Amos condemned the judges for their unjust sentencing of the poor people and their taking of bribes. For I know how many are your transgressions, and how great are your sins. You who afflict the righteous, who take bribes, and who turn aside the needy in the gate. Chapter 5, verse 12. Amos rebuked the rich for their wasteful and luxurious living, and foretold the future exile in Assyria and their punishment. Woe to those who lie upon beds of ivory and stretch themselves upon their couches, and eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall, who sing idle songs to the sound of the harp, and like David invent for themselves instruments of music, who drink wine in bowls and anoint themselves with the finest oils, but are not grieved over the ruin of Joseph. Therefore, they shall now be the first of those to go into exile, and the rivalry and the revelry of those who stretch themselves shall pass away. Chapter 6, verse 4 to 7. I want to thank you for moving with me. Tomorrow we shall conclude Amos and the God of justice. And it is when we shall also draw lessons from this book. Yes, Amos was a man who was a shepherd, and thereafter he turned to dressing the sycamore tree as another job, of course, not to burden people. So we shall get to know more about Amos and draw lessons from his teachings. I have been Mukhwana Isaac with the journey through the Bible. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.